Excuse me.
you have some power.
All right. I'm calling the meeting to order. I hope so. There's a
It's on, there's a
thing that
difference.
says on, so we shall
Did it
see.
make noise? No, he's
No.
dead. Here, take mine. Nobody wants to hear me anyways.
Okay. All right. Call the meeting to order. We have a quorum of more than 3 directors present, so the meeting is now in session. First things we'll do is we'll stand and we'll say the pledge to the flag and then a small prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So a small prayer. Father, we thank you for allowing us to come together in a free country. Help us, Father, just to do the best we can with the funds which you've allowed to come into our hands. So then we ask you. Amen. Thank everyone for attending. First off, one of the things I've started doing is just a couple of president notes, things happening over the past month. Or did,
Announce him.
Yep.
You didn't announce him. Yeah, you have a form that we're all,
Yep.
that's illegal.
I did
Did you?
that before we did the pledge.
I must, I'm slow. Sorry.
Been working
All right.
too many hours.
Yeah, I have.
One of the items that I've done is give about a 3-minute history of the last month, what's happened, just to give an update. And I did this on the president's notes, but I only made 10 copies, so I apologize. And we put 10 copies over there, so if you didn't get it, I'll read it to you as we go. No problem. The first off, just as some information to you, the board has been asking a lot of questions. And we go after a lot of thoughts, a lot of ideas, a lot of reviews, a review of a lot of things. The questions have been to Michael, who's maybe on here on his way, to Lydia, and to Randy, and to all the office staff, and the board ourselves. The reason why we're asking questions is not because we want to do anything other than understand. We've ruffled some feathers. For those, I apologize. We're trying to work to understand the system that we worked in. Why do we have the system? How do we review the system? And how do we influence the system? So we're just digging and asking questions. Why are we doing this? We have 1,500 different households that the MUD supplies water and sewer to. In the recent session, last special session, the board decided to return $10 a month to each household based on the items that we're working on. That $10 a month return is a $15,000 decrease in our revenue each month. And that's just like a house payment or just like a car payment. It comes due every month. And so for the next 21 months,
Sorry, we've been
no problem, no problem. And so for the next 21 months, there's a $15,000 decrease in our revenue. What that means is we have to find ways to reduce our spending. Just like we wish Uncle Sam would, but they'd never do. We can't do it here in the real world. We can't manufacture money. We have to reduce our spending. So what have we done so far? Well, one thing is Lydia, we're talking about the budget tonight. She's changed the budget proposal from a budgetary review to an actual review, which has made some big changes. In the past, we just used the last budget and amended the budget, amended the budget. This year, we're saying, let's go back to actual spending and then make a budget based on actual spending of the previous year. Mr. Eric Mueller has a conference call Wednesday with the Galveston County to start the process, and we're going to keep pushing to get a portable generator for the mud building here, courtesy of Galveston County. We're finding out that most of the employees of the governmental system we have are located and do their work only to make sure that they push papers and not accomplish anything. So we're having to push and repush and push and repush and constantly push to get things done.
First I've heard of that one. That's a good idea.
John has ruffled feathers in reviewing pretty well every expenditure in the month. Ask questions about it. Not because we're saying it's wrong, bad, good. What is it? We've got to find a $15,000 savings per month for the next 21 months. Michael, the great lawyer we have that keeps us all straight, has looked at us and talked to us and said that one way he can help us is that he'll start attending meetings on a quarterly basis rather than a regular monthly basis. That'll help decrease our expenditures. We've all agreed to an itemized billing. A lot of our, I've talked to a lot of our vendors and looked at invoices and said, no, we're not going to approve it until you give us an itemized billing, so we can understand what the itemized billing is all about. I've asked questions about who the perfume person is, to the garbage person. I've talked to progressive garbage people. We've done a lot of things, so we've looked for itemized billing. AEI has also come back and started doing itemized billing, so we as the board can understand where our expenditure is at. I personally have filed a FEMA request for late submission for dredging based on Harvey, and it's under review at the present time. No guarantees. And it took one hell of a lot of phone calls and people to get to the right person. We've had the first potential contract for the pre-bid bond last week. Went well, and AI and Randy will talk about that later today. The board is committed to maintaining a positive cash flow. Coming from a small business, to me, that's the most critical thing at all. I can show a big balance sheet and be broke. Like one man told me one time, he said, if you really want to be, there's a term in business called ISO qualified. ISO qualified means you have all kinds of records that show you do everything, the same thing all the time. Says you can be ISO qualified and have to make concrete boats and every one of them sink, but you can still be qualified. So budget sheet, a balance sheet doesn't tell me. What tells me is what's your operating budget for the month, what's your cash flow for the month. We'll talk about that later for ourselves. We're committed to finding ways to keeping our standards high and also reducing our costs, because we've got a $15,000 a month reduction that we have to follow for the next 21 months. So we ask for your help next months while we're doing this. If we ask questions that you think are crazy, just laugh at us and think, great, but we're looking for everything we can find. We're finding monies in other locations that can offset our budget. So thank you very much for their support. We really appreciate that very much. With that, Eric is a person here.
She's out there.
I'm going to make a small departure from the agenda. Lady wants to make a comment about fencing that she wants to talk about the next meeting, and I'm going to give her just 2 minutes because she has to go to a very important meeting. So she'll stand there and just, would you state your name?
Jeannie Janota at 12.
Is that microphone on? The switch on the top.
Jeannie Janota at 1296 Lumira. And my hope is to, and I have a copy for all of you, get a dog park somewhere here in the city. Great. So this is just a quick layout so you guys can start even considering it. We'd like to utilize, or I would like to utilize, this is just me so far, the exercise park And, you know, we could shut it down at certain times so humans can exercise. We can shut it down for the band thing on Sunday once a month, all that sort of stuff. So that's what I'm asking, is that y'all consider letting us do that, and here's a semi-budget. I would take responsibility for raising the funds so that we would ask the MUD for a little more than a trash can and, you know, permission and some assistance like that, but no tax dollars or anything like that, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank y'all so much for letting me
So generally, that would be considered public comments,
Right.
which
Chance to go to the meeting.
oftentimes are at the top of the meeting, as they are today. We are not being requested to do any formal action other than consider what you bring to us
Exactly.
in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
So, unless anybody has any objections, we would ask that normally that'll be voted on next month or whenever that is presented.
Right, just,
As a rule, just procedural.
all right, one change I've made to the agenda this week is that we're gonna consider the minutes now. It's my understanding that if we consider the minutes now and approve them, then we have a clean slate going forward, so we know the minutes of the previous meetings have all been done, everything's been controlled. So, at the present time, we'll consider the minutes for the regular meeting on July the 16th, 2018. Okay, do I have any, have a motion from the board to accept the minutes that have been written on the board? Motion given by Carter. Second. Second by John. Any discussion on the meetings, on the minutes of the July 16 meeting? Nope, all in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
Votes positive. Good. The second item will be the special meeting we had on August the 6th, where we only discussed the PUC bond refund and also the proposed budget. I was not here and neither was Eric, but we had a quorum. So my question is, do I have a motion from the board to accept the minutes?
I'll watch that.
Motion by John Prince, second by Carter. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes unanimously. All right. Moving slower just to keep track of what we're doing, so I don't lose my place. Okay. The next item on the agenda is we're going to have a presentation by the Bayou Vista Fishing Club, which is on the agenda. They've asked to present something to the board, so we're going to give them a brief time to present the presentation.
My name's Lori Laborde. I am the chairperson of the Bayou Vista Fishing Club, and we have been discussing for some time a real issue. As some of you may be aware, we've had one case of Vibrio in Bayou Vista 2 years ago. This year, we've already had 2 fish kills. And most of the problem is in canals, the blue heron, the redfish, sailfish, bonita, that end. When the tides move, that water moves halfway down the lateral and goes right back again. This water is not exchanging. It leads to low oxygen, fish kills. It's also, in my opinion, a health hazard, a health issue. We have kids, we have lots of people swimming in the canals. And Vibrio, as we're all aware, is everywhere, especially in stagnant type waters. We have an older community, lower immune system, makes them much more vulnerable to Vibrio. The gentleman that got Vibrio got it from cleaning crabs out of his canal. Spent a year in the hospital, almost died, lost his leg. This is something that you all need to be aware of. You get in the water around here, I carry on my boat, and I have at the house, I carry hydrogen peroxide as well as bleach. Any cut, I clean it right then and there. I know there's been, I think, 4 cases in the Galveston area, this year. I believe last I heard. What we're proposing is a marsh drain project. We have, this being the lateral canal, the majority of the problem area we're trying to address is down in this area. There is an existing drain. There are 2 30-inch ducts. This is Blue Heron over here, right through here. These were installed 20 some odd years ago when Joe Mims was mayor. These ducts right here are halfway silted in. These are pictures I took last winter at a low tide. You can see they're halfway silted in. There is another issue, and with them is there is a bulkhead in front of it. You can see it right here. That prevents water moving through that area. This is that bulkhead. Now, Joe tells me that the engineer who happened to have lived on Blue Heron, I don't know his name, and he no longer lives here at the time, insisted upon putting this in because they were afraid kids were going to get sucked into it or something. Those drains were also installed, in many of our opinions, incorrectly. If you go back here, they're like this. What that causes, any water moving through there, if you know anything about water movement, is when that water comes through here, the slower moving water is going to be in here and it starts silting up. So after a while, this whole area has become silted. Squeaky shoes. This is the other end of the ducts. I mean, you can see here that the silt at low tides. That's that drain area of the marsh. You can see how shallow it is. That's because there's no water moving through there. And the little water that it is just causing more silting. So right now, all the water coming down the canals is going in this direction with a very, very, very little, and I've been out there and looked at it, there really isn't any water going through this ducts to speak of. All that water that's coming down the lateral right through here, and you got a low tide, you've got a much larger mass of water back in through here that's moving this way, and most of you that's been through here know how that current runs on an outgoing tide through that, under the railroad bridge. That amount of water essentially forms a barrier against this water. It's like a wall. And that's another reason we're getting all the sedimentation in through here. It's all that water moving through here, this trying to flow through there, it can't really get out, and we have sedimentation. And I've got a down scan on mine, I've looked at it. It starts back here and builds and builds and builds all the way up to here. Right here, right now, it's a little over 5 foot. as I said, we've had 2 fish kills, 1 case of Vibrio. The increase in sedimentation is also causing less water to be exchanged. Stagnant water and future health risks. What we're proposing is twofold. Number one, removing those bulkheads in front of the existing ducts that's restricting water flow. And then we're gonna try and flush out those ducts and see if we can get those cleaned out. They're 50 foot long. I don't know if we can clean them out. The second part of it, what we're looking at is actually cutting a channel, 6 foot wide or so, 4 foot deep, right through there to allow water to move on high tides and low tides. This will increase the water exchange in the canals, reducing stagnation, improving the health of the water, reducing hopefully future health concerns, and that it would also help with reduced sedimentation at the end of the lateral canals. This is what we're talking about. This here is the existing ducts, cutting a channel right through here. We have 2 of the bulkhead contractors, Chad with Conch and Rick have already said they would step up to the plate. They would provide equipment and manpower and some of the materials to help us get this done. If we can get that done, then what will happen, and I'm certain, is we'd get more water flow from the end canals in this direction and allowing the water flows from the others in that direction still. And that should help exchange a lot more water on the end down there. This area out through here, the marsh area, is owned by Scenic Galveston. I've already had conversations with the lady with Scenic Galveston, and they see no problem with it and have offered to lend their support in any dealings we might have to have with the GLO and the Army Corps of Engineers. This is a very preliminary, very rough estimate. You know, materials for the bulkhead for that amount, if we can get it at cost, which according to the bulkhead guys, you know, they can get it for us at cost. Some labor. The big issue is we would need a backhoe of some type, a larger backhoe to dig it. Contingency, minimum 13K. It could run more. We haven't done, you know, haven't evaluated everything, the cost yet. Don't know if we're going to need to get any permits or not yet. This is all preliminary. The fishing club, through the tournament funds, has $9,000 to put toward this project. I had a conversation with the mayor, Bayou Vista Attorney, last week, and he's in favor of it. He thinks it'd be very beneficial. Scenic Galveston has already said they would help us. We don't know what others. I got Conch shelled down. I don't have Rick's on there because I just found out about it. We would provide, you know, the fishing club would seek volunteers to help with any labor and issues and et cetera. So what we'd like to do, first of all, is get the MUD's approval to remove that bulkhead section, or one section through there, and try and clean out those drains first. If we can get that done, then the next part would be we would address actually the channel, and what it would take to put it in, and we'd have to come back and get further approvals. Questions?
Before we have any questions, Lori, right?
Lori, yes.
Thank you. What we'll do first is we will, I'll entertain a motion from the board to accept the presentation, and then we'll have discussion. So do I have a motion from the board to accept Lori's presentation? Motion is made by Bob, seconded by Court. Okay, we will have a brief discussion. This is a very tenuous topic with the whole group, because this is the one reason the bond finally passed, was that dredging was taken out of the bond. So I'm gonna limit our open discussion on the floor for the next 10 minutes. So if someone would like to discuss, raise your hand and speak loud or come to the mic.
May I recommend the board ask questions first, and then open questions to the floor.
Okay? All right. Our attorney has recommended that the board ask questions before we get to the members, so.
This is not dredging.
that-
This is not dredging.
That's a statement.
That's a statement.
Right.
So you said the bond saying because of dredging, this is not dredging. So it has nothing to do with the bond.
Okay, fine. I'm just, we'll just,
When you said there's issues with the bond because of dredging, we had to do the bond over again and take dredging out. It's irrelevant. This is not dredging, nothing to do with the bond.
I think where you're going with this is
I understand what you're talking about.
consideration of the project or approval wouldn't have anything to do with bond funds. It would just be whether the board is interested in it going forward.
Wasn't it something that came up at the very first meeting, I think, when they, had a survey presentation? And so we had mentioned, what about over here? We forgot about that. Weren't we gonna look into that or work into that, or, I'm not trying to include the two. Well, this mic's not working.
This is on?
That one's not this one.
This one is? Here. If I speak, I'll lean
I was just
over at
asking
Eric's.
Carter over here.
I'll lean over to yours.
Our first
if that's
meeting, I think it was when we were first here, when we had the survey, the canal survey. Bill, didn't we talk about that a little bit over there? We briefly mentioned it, and discussed about incorporating into that a little bit or something?
Say again, sir?
Didn't we discuss incorporating that into our plans with the dredging?
Yes, we did.
I'm thinking that's what he's probably referring to.
Right.
And-
Whether or not this is part of dredging, but to help you guys out.
Right.
I've been researching this dredging for the past few months, trying to figure out what to do here.
does that, you
But
understand?
that's not much property. So
Yeah,
I'm
that's,
gonna make a decision on whether she wants to do that or not. That's the Conus's property.
No, it's not.
That line, property line goes down the center, and he told me that's on his property.
I've looked at the CAD drawings from Galveston, and it's not.
Well, that is actually, I have a question.
Good.
Generally, I don't have the answer to it. We need to answer the question of who owns the property, what permissions you must get.
Right.
There are water flow issues, I would imagine there are other interested parties in, and that it may and then fundraising issues aside, just permissions for this. The board may be all for this project. In my mind, it sounds like a good one. But then, who else do we need to get to approve it?
Well, I mean, again, the ducks are there.
Right, and that's a first level issue is until the channel project gets going, who's in charge of the ducks? I don't know either. I don't think,
Apparently they were put in by the city.
right, so
Over
that would be
20
something that
years ago.
we would want to be run to ground.
Yeah, I would think so, yeah.
And then you need to
That's
know
my
what
first
permissions you
question.
have. So the district has the ability to fund projects on county property and, Corps of Engineer, under their venue if they give approval. But until we know that, we can't there's nothing to approve today other than, are you interested in this? And then ask for more information. Or if you are not interested in this, you could say that now. And really, I don't know what other conversation there is to have about it, other than maybe if there are any cost proposals or anything like that, your tolerance to it. But in general, right now, I would imagine you are all for this, assuming that it is going forward. But that's just my assumption. That's up to you guys.
I think that, I was gonna say,
yeah,
the first two questions I think we really need to get cleared is I know y'all said y'all wanted to remove that dock, bulkhead, whatever that fixture is. Who owns that, as far as who would be the permission grantor to say to be able to remove that? And then once that's removed, then cleaning the ducts, I don't think there would be anybody objecting to cleaning the ducts. It wouldn't cause any issues with the environment that wasn't already considered when they put in there. So I think going forward, the big main question is who do we need to get permission from to remove that bulkhead?
Well,
And,
mean, the
and then I
dock or
would ask
whatever,
who
the barrier.
owns those ducts, and if the district needs to be responsible for cleaning them, or they do, or a private entity raises enough money to clean the ducts, that the permissions are all in place.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's very important, yes.
So there's a threshold issue. Who owns what and how?
That's probably a
again,
starting
After
point.
reviewing the county's property lines that they have on their CAD, even assuming it might be off a few
Sure,
feet.
sure.
The property, the ducts would end up being on that, and I have been told that that property belongs to MUD.
Okay, and if that's the case, then we just need to run that to ground and get that confirmed with the county. And
Written
Ed
confirmation.
yeah,
Sakonis
exactly. It's
Yeah,
just
yes.
basic.
Yes, this can't be
This is
verbal.
nuts
It
and
needs to be written.
bolts
This is
stuff
very
for any
legal.
project.
Ed
Who owns
Sakonis
what? Do we have consent if we're crossing
Right.
lines?
Ed Sakonis owns that property at the end. We haven't had a conversation with him yet. I wanted to present this first to see whether or not the board. get
And that's
any
where I was
interest
going
or
with it too.
Whatever else.
Yeah. Are
we
you
will
all
get-
inclined
we will
to
get
do
with
this?
them and confirm where the property lines are. And we've
That was the discussion I had with them, where the property.
One second. Anybody else on the board?
I
Bob?
think it's a good project, and if they can get clearance from Mr. Sakonis, because they're gonna have to.
Excuse me, are there any microphones you can use?
Oh, that one's not working either?
No.
You
Is
gotta
that better?
talk right into where it doesn't.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it works.
Okay,
This one's dead.
I said
No.
earlier, I think this is a good project, and if the fishing club can get permission from Mr. Sakonis, who is down there on the end of Blue Heron, I think that's the only access to get any piece of equipment over to where these pipes and the bulkheads are. That's the first step. I'm in favor of going forward with it, but then we have to know exactly what kind of cost is it gonna be? Is there gonna be any cost to the MUD? Because it's on MUD property. I think anything we can do to improve the flow in these canals is beneficial, and I thank the fishing club for taking the initiative to get this done.
We are not asking for any funds from the MUD at this point in time. We have sufficient funds to, go in there, take down the bulkhead, try and clean out those drains. That's a no-brainer, not an issue.
With that in mind, I would recommend to the board that you decide whether you are interested in supporting this project and, as necessary, give permission to go forth with this project if up to the point where you are requested for funds, that you will are interested in cooperating on access, assistance, items like that, up until you have to budget items
Right.
to pay for such a project.
Well, I don't think that's in the budget at all, but,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
let's not even talk about the budget right now. That's our next issue.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I think the first step, I agree with Bob and everyone else. Anything that, will improve the canals would be great. I appreciate that everyone's, made this effort, did the PowerPoint. I can tell that there's been a lot of work here, a lot of time spent here. But again, like the attorney said, there's legal issues, liability here. And if there's some mud property, we need some written confirmation. You know, we need a starting point legally,
Well, yeah,
You know,
we'll run to
you know, for sure.
ground. We can run
You
it to
know.
ground.
you know.
Yeah.
So I would ask for this.
I mean, if we're clean and clear, I have no
Yeah.
problem with, you know, removing that and
I would ask for an instruction to your engineer and myself to confirm the ownership and any permitting issues as to that property. But right now, not asking for any financial contribution to such a project,
Right.
other than for a minor, hopefully, you know, it's got to be
It will
fleshed out.
cost us a little bit to have our engineer, you know, look into it. I understand that, but, you know, but as far as actually funding a project like that right now, considering
That's a
our
different
budget,
consideration.
that's apples and oranges right now.
Yeah.
But, you know, again, I think we need to look at it. You know, I think it's a great idea. But, you know,
Any other?
I really thought it'd be part of the dredging, but, you know, since that was kind of divided here a little bit, I'm starting to understand the, you know, the other side of the coin. So,
As we said, we can put it as an agenda, table it, or put it as a different agenda item for next month. So that over this next month, we can go ahead and talk to Serconis and also get the information between the lawyers and the engineer to make sure that that is our property. And also, if we decide to go forward with this, I know you said you were going to use volunteers, and I hate to be that guy who says it, but we do need to have some type of a form for all the volunteers for liability, of course.
oh, sure, yeah, yeah.
Done this kind of stuff too many times.
If it's even your property.
If it is, right.
And see, honestly, that's where a lot of our costs are gonna come in, because, you know, it's gonna require his time, it's gonna require the engineer's time.
As I
So,
stated,
there will be
we already.
Them
have-
first.
Funds invested,
Bill's cheaper.
so, yeah. Uh-huh, yeah, okay, yeah.
As far as if we proceed with it, cutting the channel, or if it gets to that point, we already have Scenic Galveston, the lady at Scenic Galveston, who has contacts in the GLO and Army Corps of Engineers, and deals with them here and on other locations, has already volunteered to assist us with any permitting or any issues.
So, for instance, let me give you two quick, we're not there yet, but if there is any district property you need to use or have access to, then we simply do a temporary easement. That is a document we need to do. If there is something where you need to cross a private individual's property, then we might be the best entity, or the county might be, or somebody might be, to negotiate a temporary easement with them. And so these would be the ways you said there's only some access to the property to get a backhoe in there. So these are the kinds of things I recommend just moving forward with your full cooperation if everybody wants to do this. And then these are the kind of things we'll iron out. And now it's just, some of it's paperwork, some of it's negotiation, some of it's investigation, and things like that.
So,
As
are y'all gonna determine the property line?
We need to be in touch with you. If you have some information, I'm not the proper entity to do it. It would be kind of both of us. Bill is the first line of defense there. I'll look at it and see if I can't make sense of what he's telling me. But we're usually pretty good about that stuff between, this is all we do. So I'm not a civil engineer, but I review engineering documents all the time. Bill will run it to ground about exactly who owns what and contact every entity to make sure that they are all in agreement that here's the line, here's what permissions we need before we do anything. And you will benefit from that.
That's fine by
Even
me.
if you do it
Saves
as a
me from-
private project, you will have confirmation from a public entity that you are allowed to do it.
Yeah, it's fine.
I think that's a great use of,
I've read your report, thank you for the report. As I looked at the Parsons studies, there were numerous culverts that were plugged. So my thoughts would be, if we look at one, let's look at all of them,
does that work?
because
Is that a
there's
good game?
culverts
sounds like-
throughout
yeah,
this whole
definitely.
system that are plugged. And if we spend time or money from the mud through any measure to help one resident, we need to have it support all the residents. So I would say that we, as we move forward, to include that, to say, let's look at all the culverts, because I live up another end, and we don't have a fish kill because we ain't got any water, because it's dry. So you got water, we have no water, so it's a different, it's an issue mud-wise. And that's with 3 cities, City of Bella Vista, City of Mark, City of Hitchcock. And it's something that we need to address. My feeling is that we probably need to schedule soon, a workshop just to deal with canals. Because if the board is successful in holding the money as we planned, for the bond issue, for the work we're doing on the wastewater plant, we could have an extra $1 million left over for dredging with the current bond. That's our, that's.
Yeah, I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah,
I don't know what you're basing that
Yeah,
on,
I'm not
Mr.
sure
Matthews,
that's
and
on.
I apologize. We haven't had that discussion. I'm not the financial advisor either. But we did offer to open up the floor.
Right. So now we'll have for 10 minutes, we'll have a floor debate, so everyone speak loud and plainly and collect your thoughts before you speak. You're first and back.
May I just
Stand up.
offer an opening question? First of all,
Microphone.
Stand up.
I had a shot of cortisone in my legs today.
That's fine.
had a
I can hear
shot
you.
of cortisone in my legs today.
Okay.
Please, I don't want to
Okay.
stand. I'll speak louder if
All
you
right,
want.
very good.
I am John Houston from South Skimmer over in Omega Bay. First of all, I commend the Bio Vista Fishing Club for their efforts here. In all this talk, I heard no conversation about Omega Bay. Omega Bay was not a part of Mud 12 when all this history that is being discussed took place. But I will say that I am one here who will object to monies being spent in the future, if they are, by Mud 12, that do not complement the residents of Omega Bay, because we also have channel problems over there. With that, thank you for the time.
The only thing I would like to say is that we need to know how much money the MUD is going to spend to investigate this matter. Because once again, it's everybody's tax dollars that the MUD operates on. So the MUD spending a lot of their time and effort paying engineers, paying attorneys, paying whoever to investigate this. I'm not sure that's the best use of everyone's tax dollars at this time. To me, what the Bio Vista Fishing Club needs to do is have answers and bring those answers to the MUD without the MUD having to spend their money and their resources answering the questions about property ownership, whether the Corps of Engineers has to get on board. All those questions need to be answered. But I don't think the MUD needs to spend their money answering those questions.
Can I comment? I completely agree, and I'm sorry if I phrased it differently, but those things I would hope come from the requester and that are run through the district engineer and myself. And I can give you an estimate of my time on something that I'm just reviewing and confirming is just probably a few $100. And then I don't know about the engineer because he's going to run and he may have a different process to confirm plat or anything like that of ownership or make some phone calls. But I'm just going to oversight that work. But I agree. I don't think that was the instruction for him to run it to ground. It was
Well, we never even got to cost
Yeah.
with A&I yet. That was one of my questions I
Yeah.
was gonna bring up.
Okay.
that's exactly
There's got
correct.
to be-
That is the correct process.
There's got to be surveys made to
No.
determine property.
No.
All that stuff's already been surveyed. It's about going to collect it, contacting every entity, and saying what their opinion of the ownership and the boundaries are. That goes to the district engineer, who will then confirm that.
I thought I understood part of the land belonged to Sagonis, part of it supposedly belongs to Mud 12. There's gotta be a line in there. that
Yeah.
is surveyed.
But that's already been done. It's not a new survey, which would cost thousands. It should have already been done.
Someone's gotta get out and find the property pins.
At the same time, real world solution, if you need to do work between a property line and you've got the consent of both sides of that line, doesn't matter where the line is.
That's where I was going, is we are gonna talk to Ed Seconis, if we can get Mud to agree.
It's
to
about
let us
it's a
proceed that,
consent issue.
if we get Ed to agree
It's just
to
making
it,
sure
it's not
you
an
run to
issue.
ground everybody with an interest in it.
Okay, Gwen?
And this is very preliminary at this point.
Yeah.
You know, we're not really doing
Just a
anything.
minute ago, we said we got $14,000 a month coming out of our budget every month. I think it's a noble project, but we just paid $60,000 to Parsons, who recommended any work be done first in Omega Bay, because that's where the real issues were. All of our lateral canals close to I-45 are completely silted in. So we have no flow in Omega Bay. So if we're gonna talk about cleaning out pipes, we need to include that also. But I think we're way premature on this, because we haven't even talked about how we're gonna fund the projects that need to be done in the water plant and the sewer plant.
We are not asking Mud to fund anything.
But you're asking for the mud, the lawyer just said $200 or $300.
Yes.
Okay.
You know, it adds up. It's going to add up
And right
to
now-
what needs to be done. And I
As he,
think
as he
I'm
just
talking
said,
too much
you
to
and
try to
us,
handle.
both parties are in agreement
misconception.
that it's a non-issue.
Nobody's spending money here except a few $100s.
Would it
You
be
know,
okay
I'm
for the
sorry,
fishing club to
we
pay
just spent money
if
on
they
a
want?
project.
Yes,
A
if we
survey.
consent.
And the survey said where the biggest need was in Omega Bay.
This is not a
That's
dredging
what the
project
survey
for the
said. I
district.
appreciate
I'm in total agreement with you. I think Omega Bay should be dredged. I am totally in agreement. I'm
All
not
right,
asking, I'm not
okay,
asking you to
okay.
spend any money.
Two more questions, then we're gonna take a vote.
Thank you. Lou Wortham, Redfish Street in Bio Vista. John, I remember where discussion of this came from. It was when the draft report on dredging was submitted by the engineers. There were several items that, where people sitting here, members of the board, told the engineers that were presenting the draft report, don't forget about thus and so, and these two culverts were included in that. And there were several items where we anticipated, where the board anticipated, that the final report would include consideration of the existence of these items. I think they didn't, I don't think they even knew about the
Didn't even know
culverts.
about ours. Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I don't
They
think
didn't
y'all
have
have
it on
received
there
the final
first.
report.
I thought we discussed that. Didn't you bring that up
We-
a
we-
month after the fact? that, you know?
The board has presented from Parsons is considered their final report. They said that included. So I asked
So it
them,
included consideration of all the things that we asked for?
Yes. Yes, 'cause I-
Including
yeah.
these,
I confirmed that in writing to them, yes.
okay, so what'd they say about it?
They said they had measured them, they had confirmed them, they had the readings, and the cost contained cleaning culverts. But they did not mention this one, their cost contained cleaning the pipe, not drinking it out.
Richard, before we go,
Sorry, I didn't follow.
Their cost contained,
This
included
is not a
cleaning the
request for
culverts,
district
the
funds.
existing culverts. What's that?
Yeah.
Cleaning the culvert.
Yes.
Richard,
So
let me,
we've done some
he's
engineering
done.
consideration of what,
Just happened.
cleaning these culverts.
Well, Eric could answer your
What
question.
was the question? I had a comment in relation, but
It's about whether the cost of this was included in previous estimates for district funds and how that affects going forward.
cost
Is
was
that in
included
general
in
a good summary
The
of that?
initial survey, if I remember right.
the
'cause
the
that's where
cost, the
question-
I
cost
know
of
about
cleaning
when
those
it
out,
was
and then you mean
added.
the dredging, the whole entire project?
regardless.
Yes, that was included.
Right, that was, you know, right.
We've got some information.
Yeah.
There was, before we go on with the comments, there was questions, there was two things I wanted to bring up. One, I asked our lawyer quick just now, and he said for the cost that would be incurred between him and the engineer to research this, that we could itemize it and the fishing club could take care of those costs. So there wouldn't be any mud funding used to take care of clearing that. As far as the dredging, one thing I am going to propose is, since now we have all the funding, and I just talked to Laura to ask if we can do this, since we have all, not the funding, but the numbers in and everything, I would like to put together for this November a bond for dredging. It's totally separate. We'll have the numbers. People can see exactly how much it's going to cost in their taxes and everything. It's going to be a totally separate entity, but I would like to propose that, and so we can go ahead and start researching that and look at that for November.
Well, I think that's a completely different.
Well, no, I understand it, but, well,
You know,
but
I mean,
there's,
I mean, we need to have a workshop on it.
right, I understand it, but I'm
Right.
saying that's the, at least the intent from where I would like to see that, because I can tell that's what's coming up in this as far as.
Well, sure.
With the,
you know,
so.
It's
but-
going to. I mean, it's
Right.
going to, because we have this division. I mean,
Right.
you know, we need help, we all need help, and I wish I could help us all. You know, but sometimes hard to do, so. But, I mean, right now, this is very preliminary, very initial.
Right,
We're
no,
just
it
looking
was
for
just-
some help. You know, Bill's been waiting up there.
Procedurally, that's a
Yes.
10-minute time frame. The board can choose to accept any additional questions.
Okay.
Well, I took some of their
Yeah,
time, so that,
yeah,
yeah,
fair
they,
enough,
so
yeah.
no, there was
So did
questions,
I.
go ahead, yeah.
The motion in front of the board is to accept, because we have a motion second, to everybody vote to accept the presentation.
I would like to answer that man's question.
Yeah, I was
first.
gonna
His
say, there's
hand's
still
been
a
up
few.
while we were speaking.
Yeah, I
Okay.
took some of their time, so yeah, we still, so.
Yes.
But the motion in front of the board is just to accept, not to do anything. That is
No,
accept the
well,
motion.
To accept
you-
what?
you've
What
accepted
are we accepting?
a report there, which isn't necessarily required that you accept it in form. But right now, it's, you would be instructing your consultants about what we are authorized to do. So if there are any other public questions or comments before you make that motion, would be the time to take them. After you make the motion, that will be the end of this issue.
Right.
Until such time as you are not authorizing the use of any, to fund a construction project, but you may be authorizing your engineer and myself to do a little bit of digging, and then you can complain about it later to us. And, you know,
Okay, one
do
more
as you
question.
see fit with it.
Did you-
For the past several months, since we've had that meeting when the engineers came in, I've
Need
been
to come up with a
researching
deal.
the canals both in Omega Bay.
Hey, Bill, can you come up here a little bit? You have a tough time here.
I'm losing my voice anyway. Okay, for the past several months, since that meeting, I've been researching what's been going on in our canals. Because what I want to see is we take and look at this as a long-term, we dredge, we may do maintenance, and then we dredge 20, 30 years from now, but how do we do short-term maintenance? I've used my jet ski where I've gone up and down every canal. I've also laid out some, because I'm an engineer, typical nerd, of how we may redesign some of these areas, both in Omega Bay and that. From what Lori's wanting to propose is the right thing for that area that she's proposing. I'm not even sure exactly we know how they should do that yet. That's where we got to sit down with the Corps of Engineers and talk to them how that part that she's proposing works with the other end of the lateral canal because of flows, and how we may want to narrow that down there near the bridge to create flows. But I'm not going to get into all that here because I could talk for hours on it. But Ed Sakonis, when I sit down and talk to him, this is a couple times now, he said that, well, he owned that property because of the midline. And I'm like, okay, we can figure that out, who really owns the property. He also said he's comfortable with us coming on there, and when I say us, it's the community, not, I'm not part of the fishing club, but to come on and do what, that type of work that she's proposing. You know, we gotta get all the right procedures and all that stuff in place. So that's good news, all good news all around. Now, the statement that I think, I'm sorry, I can't see your name for you.
Carter.
Carter, I'm sorry, I'm blank. Whether or not this is part of dredging or not, okay? When you look at Omega Bay and you look at us, they have the same problem. And that is over on the feeder, where you get off on the freeway onto the feeder, they've got a pipe right there. Same type of problem. Now, the question is, do we bulkhead or is it called riprap? I can never get it right.
Riprap.
Riprap out
4 inch and over.
and dredge some of
Dredge
that
6 inch
out
and
so
over.
that Omega Bay gets flow into that pipe. Also, in talking with Ed about how would you clean these pipes, and we may have every 2 years, we pull a pig through, basically take an inner tube or a tire, pull it through to clean the pipes and weed, mud, or whoever. You know, we do that every few years as general maintenance. So we need to sit down with the Corps of Engineers, and I've talked to Eric about it, because I think he's the point of contact, and get down into the engineers and say, okay, here's all the things that we think we need to do. a lot of the ideas that I have and some people I've been talking to, how do we lay this out and make sure that it's the right thing to do? And it extends our dredging so that we don't have to go do this 10 years from now. We maybe do it 15 with minor, which is gonna probably be over in Omega Bay. I've also looked at Omega Bay where you go in and out of your canals, which I've sucked up oysters over there, and rip rock some of that, because you gotta change the flow. It's something Lori showed on her chat, where incoming flow is diverted and it sucks out the water. I'm an aeronautical engineer. I understand flows, but I'm not a hydraulic engineer. So that's why I got to sit down and talk to, if Eric wants me to do it. Because I look at Eric as the guy, if he's going to be the guy. So
Okay,
this is part of dredging. All of this is part of dredging. So when you say it's not, it is part of dredging because they need it exactly as we do.
Yeah. Everybody needs help here.
It wasn't on the bond though, and
Everybody
I
needs help.
think,
No, it wasn't.
Carter, let me clarify this. The use of bond funds for dredging was specifically excluded.
Excluded.
The district still has the right to pay for any dredging project it sees fit out of operating accounts. It has that right.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. So little projects like this, if you want to finance a large project, it's probably more appropriate to finance it through bonds. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about one specific request for a project and the district's consent to that project. That's what's on the table right now. That's the agenda item.
I think, and I hope that what Richard was talking about, the whole mud district was the Omega Bay. Because they're worse shape than we are.
I just want to make sure that when we sit down with the Corps of Engineers, or the right engineers,
That's right.
I gotta work with Eric, this is the guy
Focus
that's
it.
in charge. And we say,
Herding cats.
let's do all the smart stuff. Not just go dredge here, dredge there, and in 5 years we have the same problem. And I'll be glad to work with Eric, Lori, you know, I'll be glad to, and I'm sure Lori will be glad to work with Eric. So, but I think it does fall into.
You said be $100 for you to do
I think right now we're in the very preliminary stages of all this.
I don't
and,
know. I was trying to get.
I don't think we need to
Bill
give
giving us-
authorization either one of
If
you.
he doesn't have to go
I think at this
investigate it,
point,
it's about making a few
we need
phone
to
calls.
leave it up to the Biovision
Probably
Fishing Club
also a
to
few
actually
to
get
several
some
hundred.
documentation
Mine-
that
mine
clearly
is
states
just
boundary
I'm
lines.
gonna just
Who
check
owns
all
what, and just like Bill
$1,000 would be
suggested,
the
move forward a
budget
little bit.
that research
I'm not
tried.
against it, but I do think we need
If
to
you
consider
would probably
all the residents.
cost
I-
less than
that
that
was
if they
my big
provided
preach,
all
and
the
I'm gonna stand
information.
strong on that. Getting on this board, that, you know, I'm interested in the entire district. So, you know, and, so, you know, we need to find a way to work together on all this.
Again, we're not asking for any funds
Right.
or anything out of the district at this point in time.
Okay, the